All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Blakey Locke Show. It is the second to last conference preview. It is the Big 12 preview featuring Dillon Cheverere from the Circling Back podcast. He's a huge Texas football fan. Texas is the team to watch in the Big 12 this year. So to start off the episode, it's going to be me and Dillon diving into Texas, their expectations for this season, where we see the season going, what would make it a successful season for the last season in the Big 12 for Texas? What is it going to look like when Texas heads to the SEC? We're going to answer all those questions, talk about that from a fan's point of view, from an outsider's point of view. And then after that segment is over, it's going to be me running through the rest of the conference solo, going team by team, a couple win totals that I like. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the episode. All right, I'd now like to welcome on a very special guest. It is the co-host of the Circling Back podcast, Dillon Cheverere. Dillon, what's up?
Hey, how we doing, Blake? Thanks for having me on, man. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. Obviously, excited to talk Texas football. Kind of the only thing we've talked about in the past is like hot young Brits looking for love. So I'm happy that we're
Yes, we both are big Love Island UK guys. You've been helping us out a lot with timeline for all the shows and giving us some sweet graphics to work with for our episodes. So we appreciate that. By the way, one of the reasons why I asked you to push this recording back an hour is that I had to watch the live commitment of five-star defensive end Colin Simmons out of Duncanville, Texas. So he announced for Texas about half an hour ago. So that was kind of exciting. So thanks for with me a little bit.
Yeah, I did just see that, which is perfect timing and kind of going with the whole theme of, it's what everybody wants to know. Is Texas back? It's the question we ask, the media asks every year. And this year seems to be somewhat for real, but just as a little back, I was just kind of looking into, because obviously we go through this thing with Texas every year, like, are they back? And then they have kind of a disappointing season, but it seems to be going in the right direction. But I was curious, like, is it overblown and people just like making fun of Texas because it's in kind of an easy target to make fun of? But it is crazy that they have not won the Big 12 since 2009, which was Colt McCoy's senior year.
Yeah.
And they've not won 10 regular season games since that 2009 season, which that was the part that really kind of shocked me.
It's definitely been a tough stretch. Yeah. So 2009, the Big 12 title season that you mentioned, also they went to national championship that year. And I was actually in attendance for that one when Colt McCoy gets hurt against Alabama, goes down. And then when he goes down in that game, they put in a quarterback by the name of Garrett Gilbert, local guy at Lake Stevens High School here in Austin. And he actually played decently that game, like the rest of the game in the national championship, which gave Texas fans a lot of confidence going into the finals. The next season. Of course, they lost that national championship game. So Garrett Gilbert takes over, and he's just terrible. He's awful. And that was, in my opinion, Mac Brown, like that was kind of his last shot at a title, right? 2009. And so momentum just started to slide and it just kept sliding. Still recruited well, but like he had his national championship. He still had recruits coming in, but they couldn't put it together. And then you have the I guess it's 2015. I think they had a good season. Sam Ehlinger was quarterback. They won the Sugar Bowl against Georgia, and that was like the whole "we're back" thing happened.
Mm-hmm.
Texas is easy to make fun of. It's been an underwhelming, underperforming program since 2009, no question about it. Like you said, no conference championships, anything like that. So Texas is a big program. It's easy to make fun of, and Sam Ehlinger just put that target on their backs by saying that. But even I, as a Texas fan, have like fully embraced it. Anytime like Texas will do something like okay it could be against Rice, or North Texas. It's like, oh look, Texas is back. So I think some fans, myself being one of them, we kind of just embrace it and go with it. We don't actually think Texas is back. I think Texas is going to be decent this year. but back, no, they're not going to be back until they're actually back and win at least a conference title. So
Yeah, I think you have to embrace it and just kind of go with because I don't know how bad it would be. I think the Sam Ellinger thing set Texas back in terms of just like being made fun of on the internet, like set them back pretty far because that clip just gets reused over and over and over again. But um, I don't know. I was actually born in Texas. I was born in Houston. I only lived there for like a year and a half, and then my family moved, and I never lived in Texas again. But when Texas was good, when I was a kid with like the Vince Young teams, I used being born in Texas as like an excuse to be a Texas football fan because
yeah,
those teams were so awesome. And then even the Colt McCoy teams, like I would always root for them. And then when they just stopped being as good, I kind of was like, well, I don't need to pretend to be a Texas football fan anymore.
yeah.
Um,
I
but
mean,
because of those days,
sorry, go ahead.
uh, I kind of just have like a soft spot in my heart still for
Okay.
Texas, just because of those days. The Vince Young teams were awesome. That's kind of like what got me into college football. I was probably like, what was that, 2006?
2005, 2005.
2005.
Yeah.
So I was like 9 years old, 10 years old
Huh?
when that game happened, the USC Texas game, and I was rooting for Texas, and so that was kind of like got me to like love college football. So I'll always have like a soft spot for Texas. So I'm rooting for them, and I think this year, obviously, it's interesting too because it's their last year in the Big 12. So we're talking about they haven't won a Big 12 title since 2009. This is their probably last chance to ever win a Big 12 title. It'd be nice to leave the league going out with a Big 12 championship because I know there's been like some I guess TCU and Kansas State, like those schools that have won. Well, Kansas won the Big 12 championship, TCU going to the playoff. Kind of like making fun of Texas and Oklahoma, basically being like, yeah, we don't really need you. Like you guys can go to the SEC. Like you're not even winning this conference. So I think if Texas could go out with winning the conference, it would be a nice way to leave everybody else behind.
Yeah, I would obviously, as a Texas fan, I would love to see it happen. There's no excuse for a program like Texas to go 13 years without a conference title. That's just simply inexcusable, considering the recruiting grounds that inside the state of Texas and the vast resources that that program has. But yeah, I mean, this is Sarkisian's third year as Texas head coach. First year they were awful. Didn't really have the talent was pretty depleted. So his second year, they go 8-4. They go from 5-7 to 8-4. So that's a decent improvement. The talent is catching up. I mean, he's done an incredible job recruiting in the short time he's been at Texas. Top 5 class last year. This year, of course, like we started off with, landed Colin Simmons. There should be another good recruiting class, but they have talent there. Offensive line, all 5 starters returning. They have a top, maybe top 3 receiving core in the country. They had a transfer come in from Georgia, A.D. Mitchell, who's been turning heads in training camp. Xavier Worthy's there. So much talent. And also, I think luckily they're kind of catching the rest of the Big 12 in a sort of a down year. It feels like Oklahoma is not the Oklahoma we're used to right now. They're still kind of rebuilding that program after Lincoln Riley left and took Caleb Williams with him, and some other guys left the program too. So that gave programs. Kansas State, Baylor won the Big 12 title 2 years ago, and then OU before that. Of course, Kansas State won it last year. So it's been kind of just up for grabs. This year is the best year for Texas to finally catch one, and I think they have as good a shot as anyone. And to see if they were to pull it off in the last year before going to the SEC, that would be huge for them and a good little momentum boost going into a much more difficult conference in the SEC. So, man, I think it's going to be an exciting season. I'm actually really I'm most excited for this season than I have been in a very long time.
Yeah, I think you should be. I mean, like you said, I think it is going to be a bit of a down year. Like, I guess nobody really saw what TCU did last year. Like, nobody really saw that coming. But at the same
Yeah.
time, like, Max Duggan's gone. Oklahoma, like you said, they're just still not there. Like Oklahoma's not going to be Oklahoma. And a bunch of teams like Iowa State isn't what Iowa State has been kind of the last few years. Like some of those teams, and even Baylor's kind of a step down from those
Yeah.
teams that were more competitive. And I mean, so Texas is the favorite. They're like around even money right now to win the conference, which is a decent margin ahead of anybody else. I think Oklahoma was like plus 350 or something like that. And like you said, AD Mitchell and Xavier Worthy, maybe outside of the Ohio State guys, are probably the second best. I would say the second best wide receiver duo in the country. And then obviously Quinn Ewers is coming back. We're looking for more Quinning.
Yep.
And I would say he obviously is gonna Texas's season is gonna be largely based off of like how good he can be and how big of a step
Absolutely.
he can take.
Yeah.
Because the talent is there everywhere else, the coaching is there everywhere else. And then even the only thing I'll say about that, like even if Quinn Ewers, I think he's going to be really good, and I think after last year, I think he had like so much pressure on him and ended up having like a good season, but I think just because of the amount of pressure, like people kind of nitpicked at some of his performances late in the season.
Yeah.
Um, but he's so young. Like I think I think he's really going to be able to build off of it and have a good year.
Yeah. His story is interesting, and you're right. A lot of the season is going to come down to how much he's improved. I mean, he obviously has a ton of talent, right? He has an incredible arm and just feel for the game. He had some moments of just absolute brilliance last season, and then some throws you're like, what is going on here? Just misses receiver by 5-10 yards. It was really ugly at times. But yeah, it's a guy who obviously he skipped his senior year of high school, right? I mean, he enrolled at Ohio State a year early, so he was basically should have been a senior in high school. Goes to Ohio State, was there for a year, comes to Texas, and immediately he is starting quarterback for Texas, which is a big stage, obviously. And I know this sounds like it makes making excuses for him, and I guess I am in a way, but the guy is still extremely young. Like he's a third year now. I guess he's a redshirt sophomore now, and he had the injury last year. He was looking he in the game against Alabama here in Austin. He starts off first quarter. He throws for I think 134 yards in the first quarter, looking really really good. Goes down with that shoulder injury. So he just had like a weird run so far. Um, Comes back against OU and just looks absolutely unbelievable. Has the game of his life against OU. They win that game 49-0. It's like, okay, this is the guy we've been waiting for the whole time. Then the season goes on. He just has some weird struggles and didn't really make a whole lot of sense. This off season, apparently he's like completely rededicated himself to, fitness and studying the playbook. And, he didn't leave for spring break this year. Instead, he stayed in as a whole thing. Like, oh, this guy's like totally dialed in now. So who knows? I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
he ends up being the quarterback that he was supposed to be coming in, Texas is going to be really, really good. And that offense is going to be really, really dangerous with that offensive line. I said, with all five guys returning and that receiving core. So I'm really excited to see how Quinn has, progressed since last season. Because if he's good, I think Texas could be have an unbelievable offense. The defense is a little bit more suspect, but offense should be ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, with him kind of like locking in, obviously, it was like a huge offseason story was the recruitment and commitment of Arch Manning coming to Texas. And Texas also has, which I think between Quinn and Arch, people kind of forget about Malik Murphy,
Yeah,
who
that guy's a freak.
redshirted and could possibly be like the most talented quarterback out of the three. Like everything I've heard about him is that he's just absolutely ridiculous. Like if you look, there was that picture that went viral of
Yeah.
Quinn and Malik Murphy and Arch like all flexing and like shirtless. And like you said, like I think having those two guys, like both Malik Murphy and Arch, that at different programs probably could be the starting quarterback, like week one starting quarterback, is probably pushing Quinn a lot more to be like, I
Yeah.
can't really like mess around. Like this job could easily be taken from me. Like if I don't kind of show up and I'm not the guy. And I think that also helps Texas, not only because I think it's pushing him, but also if he gets hurt again, or if maybe just something goes wrong and like things aren't really clicking, like they do have like other options at quarterback that could save the day.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sarkisian has he has a dilemma on his hands for next season. I think that the expectation is that Quinn Ewers plays out this year and he declares for the draft. So next year, in theory, it's a battle between Arch Manning and Malik Murphy. And I don't think many people expected Malik Murphy to be as good as he is. And of course, he hasn't really played much football yet, but from all reports, he's just an unbelievable prospect. He's a huge kid. He's got a huge arm. And so if this kid, okay, if he is far and away better than Arch Manning next year, he's going to be the starting quarterback. But I think even if it's even at all, or even if maybe if he's even just a little bit better, I still think Arch gets the nod just because, I mean, Sarkisian's legacy is kind of depending on how good Arch Manning turns out to be. And so it's going to be, are those two going to be on the Texas roster next season? Probably not. I think one of them is probably going to hit the transfer portal, and I don't see it being Arch Manning. So I think Malik Murphy would have to leave no doubt whatsoever that he's the better quarterback in order to get that starting job. It's good. It's going to be a tough call for Sark, and yeah, that's going to be a wild story to follow a year from now to see who comes out of fall camp as the starter, because the other person or the other player might not be there for long.
Yeah, I agree, and it will be interesting to see in like week one against Rice when Texas is probably going to be up like 4 touchdowns. Like this
Yeah.
Malik Murphy, when does he come in? Do we see Arch play? Like all that will be interesting and maybe a little bit telling for
Yeah.
what we see for next year.
Yeah.
But
No
speaking
offense.
of that,
I was
no,
going to
go
say
ahead.
no offense to Rice, but I think Malik, I think he's going to be the number 2. He's probably going to start or come into the game midway through third quarter. So I think we're going to see plenty of him and then plenty of Arch in that game. So that'll be interesting to see how those guys look. I mean, that's obviously it's Rice. It's not a true test or anything, but just see how the snaps
Yeah.
shake out and see how those guys, how comfortable they look will be fun to watch.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. What I was going to say is looking at their schedule, because they do play Rice week one, which is kind of a nothing game. But then week two is going to Alabama, which
Yeah.
is obviously a massive test. So that Rice game is going to be interesting. They probably, like you said, we're probably going to see backups probably a lot of the second half. They're probably not going to want to show a lot. And I mean, it should be an easy win. But then week two, like we're going to know how good Texas is really fast because they're going to go to Alabama. They don't have to win the game for Texas to be good. There's like look ahead lines out there. They're only 7-point underdogs, which going to Alabama, like that's a lot of people are much bigger underdogs going to Alabama than 7 points. But like if they can be competitive, which they were last year at home against, they really should have won the game last year against Alabama. I think they were the better team that day and just didn't win the game. If they go to Tuscaloosa and win, then it's like I don't even know, like things are gonna get nuts if that happens.
Yeah, I mean, luckily after that they have Wyoming at home, and then they go at Baylor. Might be a more difficult game, but you're right. I mean, I don't think anyone expected Texas to be as competitive as they were against that game last season. Of course, it was in Austin, but starting quarterback goes down in the first quarter, and Texas, they were hanging tough with them the entire game, and Alabama had to pull it out at the end there, won by I guess 1 point. And this is going to be a better Texas team than we saw last year. And Alabama's looking for a quarterback. Of course, it's Alabama. They have talent at every single position. But if they start, I think his name's Jalen Milroe. If they start him, he did not look good at times last season. So I know they brought in some transfer, like at least one transfer from somewhere. So that guy might get the start. But they're looking for a quarterback. So you don't really know what you're going to get from Alabama. Texas, I believe, is catching them at a good time. Of course, the game is in the evening and it is in Alabama, which is a whole different environment than what they're used to. So I don't know, man. I don't expect Texas to win that game, but I would lean Texas in the points. I don't think they lose by more than 7 points. I think that's a pretty solid bet at this point. But you're right. If they win that game, it's going to start the hype machine. And luckily, they don't have a big game until Oklahoma after that, which is going to be early October. So
No, I think
there
having
between Alabama and Oklahoma, between with Wyoming, Baylor, and Kansas.
yeah, having Wyoming the next game is huge because that would be super easy. Like go to Tuscaloosa, and even if you don't win, like lose by 3 or 4, like play really well, and kind of like, oh man, we really have something, and then you come back the next week against like I don't know, like Kansas State or something, and you
Right,
just could easily
right.
slip up and lose that game. So having Wyoming at home the next week is pretty nice. And yeah, I agree. I think that's kind of a coin flip game between Texas and Alabama. I'm like more sure about what Texas has than Alabama, especially quarterback, which your co-host Will DeFreeze that'll be a big week in the office. His
That's right.
Crimson Tide against
Big Bama guy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that'd be devastating for him if Alabama took
Yeah,
the
it would
loss
be.
there.
Yeah,
Um,
a ton of
then
talent on this Texas team. Sark he usually starts off hot in his games, and then by the second half, the other teams tend to figure out what he's doing, and he has struggled a little bit at kind of like evolving as the game does, and so his second halves aren't as strong as his first ones, but he's got talent this year, so the excuses are running out for him. He's got to put something together real fast.
yeah, and I mean I think other than the Alabama game, which is obviously going to be tough, I don't think the schedule is too bad for Texas. They only leave the state of Texas twice the
Yeah.
entire season. One is that game in Tuscaloosa, and one is at Iowa State, which is a game they should win pretty comfortably anyways, because their away games are at Baylor and at TCU, the neutral site game obviously against Oklahoma, and then at Houston, which is now a Big 12 game. So I
Mhm.
mean, they're every game they play, they're other than Alabama, really, they're going to be staying close to home. There's going to be a lot of Texas fans at all of those games that they play, even at Houston and TCU and those places. So I think things are basically setting up perfectly for Texas. Where I think in the past it was like, oh, we would really hope they would win the Big 12, and if they didn't, it's like some people will kind of make fun of them, but it'd be like, oh, I mean, Oklahoma had a really good team or whatever. This now it's like if they don't win, there's kind of no excuses for them. So I think it's going to be. I don't know. I picked them to win the conference. I actually bet them to win the conference. I think even at even money, it was like a good bet because I really don't think they're anybody else in the conference is quite up to their level. And honestly, for me, like which you probably don't want to get yourself into this mentality as an actual fan because then it gets dangerous. But my like perspective of this Texas team is like they're definitely going to win the conference. It's more like could they somehow steal that Alabama game? Even if they lose that Alabama game, could they win 11 other games, finish 11-1? And I'm thinking like they're like a fringe college football playoff team in my
Yeah,
mind. And if Quinn, and really it's Quinn, like we said, if
yeah.
Quinn's the guy, I think they could go 11-1 and be a college football playoff contender.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I joke about Texas being back, like I still have. I mean, I have battered fan syndrome, where I just refuse to believe that this program is going to be really, really good until they actually do it, because it's been so long since they've been that kind of team. On paper, yeah, you're right. It's set up really well. Schedule looks great. They have so much talent. Sark's third year in the program. They have a Quinn Ewers is a really, really talented quarterback. Everything looks really good on paper, but I haven't seen it in so long. So I refuse to buy into what you're saying. I can't let myself do it.
I
I'm
know.
sitting right now somewhere between 9-3 and 10-2. One probably 10-2. I lean more toward, which would be a good season. I mean, that gets Texas to a Big 12 title game. And so I like 10-2. Let's say they lose to Alabama and then they lose another game that they're probably not supposed to. It could be like at Iowa State's probably a dangerous game for them, just because Iowa State plays Texas tough every single time. It's in Ames. 10-2 is probably where I am right now. And I might even like if someone offered that to me, I might even take it. That's a good season. Um, but they have the talent to be as good as you're saying they could be. So that's why I'm so excited. I don't really know what to expect, and it's going to be a fun ride.
Yeah, no, I think it should be fun. I mean, I think they really the expectation is should be to win the conference, and then anything more than that would be like an unbelievable season. But I just wanted to end on this. Obviously, I said earlier it is the last year in the Big 12 as a Texas fan, and recently, and I know I've seen you on Twitter get into this a little bit with all the conference realignment stuff and people saying, is it bad for college football or whatever? Obviously, Texas and Oklahoma were like a little bit ahead of this now
Yeah.
crazy realignment stuff. They were kind of one of the first group to move. Are you like with Texas heading to the SEC? Is that something you're excited about? Are you going to miss some of the old rivalries they used to have? Obviously, Oklahoma's still going, so that rivalry is staying. Or are you like pumped that they're going to be playing in the best conference against the best competition and the best
Yeah.
matchups on TV every week?
So I don't know how many people realize how like playing in the Big 12, and since OU every year is at a neutral site, games in Austin, home games for us have been like pretty terrible. I mean, we get like a Baylor and a Kansas State. Like those are considered big games in Austin. And so it's hard to really get that. Like I'm looking at the schedule this year, and I just bought my first tickets for the season, and I went straight to the last week of the season, which is Tech. Tech will be in town, and that's like Texas Tech hates Texas so much, so that's just a fun game. But schedules in Austin are just bad, and like there aren't any road games that really get you excited. Like I'm not trying to go to Lawrence, Kansas, or I'm not trying to be offensive or anything here. I don't want to go to Waco for a football game. This doesn't get me excited. So yes, Texas is going to be in a more difficult conference in the SEC, and they're going to struggle probably for a while. I understand that. But also in 2024, we have Georgia coming into town. I think Florida comes to town. Those are games that we just haven't seen here in forever. So that part is really exciting. The quality of football is what I'm most excited about. So yeah, I am very excited, even though I'm not expecting Texas to win or like be a high level winning program in the next 5 years. But I'll take that like short term trade for just better quality football and home games. And if I want to travel to Oxford, Mississippi to go see Texas play, I'm gonna have a chance to do that. Or Knoxville, like that's exciting to me. So yeah, I am very excited about it.
Yeah, and I think you should be. I mean, I went to South Carolina. I'm a huge South Carolina fan, obviously, and they're not a team that's really competing for the SEC. But when every week you're like, oh, we're playing Georgia. Like I went to a game a couple years. They're in the SEC West, so we don't play them every year. But a couple years ago, we played Alabama in Columbia, and I went to that game. And it's like even if you don't go in being like, oh yeah, we're going to beat Georgia or beat Alabama, the fact that you're playing those teams week in and week out just gives you some like level of buzz because you're like, this could be the week that we like pull it off and we
Yeah.
beat Georgia or beat whoever. Like last year for South Carolina, Tennessee, the last game of the SEC schedule, Tennessee came to Columbia, and all Tennessee had to do was win, and they were going to be a college football playoff team. South Carolina upsets them at home, knocks them out of the college football playoff, and like that might as well be a playoff win
Yeah.
for as a fan. Just being a part of games like that, or it's just like so special that I
Yeah.
think you got to take it.
Waking up Saturday morning knowing that your team is going to play Georgia or Tennessee, Alabama is just so much more fun than waking up and looking forward to a 2:30 kickoff against Houston. Like it doesn't do much for me. So it's just more fun. It's just more fun, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah. I'm excited to have Texas in the SEC as an SEC football guy. But yeah, I think that's it. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking some time. I know you have a busy podcast scheduled throughout the week, and everybody should go listen to all those podcasts if you don't already. Circling Back and Too Much Dip.
Yep.
And is there anything else you want to throw out there?
I don't think so, man. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing it. And yeah, everybody go listen to especially the Love Island pods.
That's right.
You
Check
can,
it out.
yeah.
All right, man. I
All
appreciate
right.
it.
All right. Thanks again to Dylan for coming on to talk Texas football. If you don't already listen to the Circling Back podcast, it is my favorite podcast in the world. So give it a shot, give it a listen, and I'm sure you will enjoy it as much as I do. But going through the rest of the Big 12 conference, Texas obviously is at the top of the conference. Like I said, I'm going to be betting Texas, if that wasn't clear, to win the conference at plus 105. You should be able to get it at even money at the worst. And I think if Texas loses to Alabama week 2, but looks strong and competitive, I'm going to be betting a Texas national championship future. I think the price will get really good if they lose to Alabama, but honestly, even if they lose to Alabama, as long as they look competitive, I think they can win every other game on their schedule. An 11-1 Big 12 champion, especially if it's Texas, will make the college football playoff. So that's something I'll be looking at, something I'll be tuned into, but I also be betting Texas in that game, especially if it stays at 7. But the second team, in terms of the odds to win the Big 12, is Oklahoma. They're plus 340 to win the Big 12. Their win total is 9.5. Brent Venables is back for year 2. Year 1 was really disappointing. It was a bad season for Oklahoma, even in what was a kind of the start of a new era. It was still a disappointing season. Dillon Gabriel's back again. He had a decent season last year, had a little bit of an injury issue, but the team just wasn't very good. They have a bit of a favorable schedule this year, which helps a little bit. But their win total is at 9.5. And honestly, this is my favorite win total in this conference, going under that win total of 9.5. There's a ton of turnover on this team, especially defensively. Brent Venables is still trying to figure out how to get the magic he made on those Clemson defenses over to Oklahoma. And it's just not translating so far. And I think with turnover, it's going to make it even harder. There's a lot of turnover on the offensive line. I think that's going to make things tough on Dillon Gabriel, who I do think is a good college quarterback, but his ceiling is only so high. And I just don't think Oklahoma's going to be able to reach it. I don't think they're going to beat Texas. It's going to be tough for them to win all these conference games against teams that I think are a little bit closer to them than the odds makers would maybe make it seem. So I like that under 9.5 wins on Oklahoma. The next team on the list is Kansas State, the defending Big 12 champions, upset TCU in the Big 12 championship game last year. Their win total is at a 7.5, but super juiced towards the over. I'm sure there's some eights out there on the board. Uh, this is an interesting team. Kleiman has his system, and it just seems to work every year. Obviously, losing Deuce Vaughn is huge. He's a difference maker type of player. They lose their top receivers, their top edge rusher. So they lose a lot of talent, but Will Howard is back at quarterback. He is the guy that stepped in for Adrian Martinez and won the Big 12 championship game for Kansas State. The offensive line is returning, which is huge for Will Howard. Um, and again, this is a system on both sides of the ball. Chris Kleiman just kind of finds his guys, and they seem to fit into the system well. Will Howard kind of functions in the system well. And so I think it'll be another good year for Kansas State. I don't think they're going to be winning the conference. But the win total of 7.5, I think 7 or 8 wins is about right. So I don't have too much on Kansas State other than it should be another solid year for them, but maybe not quite reaching the heights that they ended up reaching last year. Um, so the next team, very interesting, is Texas Tech. They are 9-1 to win the conference. Their win total is at 7.5. They're a team that's getting a ton of love from the media, from some fans, thinking that this could be Texas Tech making a big jump. It's year 2 for Joey McGuire. He had a really solid first year at Texas Tech. Really is part of the reason that they're getting this hype is that they did make a good step forward. The offense should be awesome. I have no doubt that the offense will be awesome, but there's a ton of question marks on this defense. This team, despite being exciting last year, they won 3 games in overtime, which It's really hard to try to replicate that kind of success late in games, winning three overtime games. Uh, Texas Tech is kind of the Ole Miss of the Big 12. Their offense is going to be high powered. Their offense is going to be fast. They're going to go for it on tons of fourth downs. They're going to go for it when you think they should kick a field goal, when you think they should punt. They're going to go for fourth downs. It's going to be exciting to watch, but their defense leaves a lot to be desired. So for me, it's just a pass. I think I'm going to bet Texas Tech in some spots week to week, especially when they're underdogs. I think that'll be a good time to target them. They'll be aggressive and they'll go after teams like Texas or Oklahoma that maybe they're not supposed to beat. But I think overall, season long, I'm not totally sold on the Texas Tech dream that a lot of people are excited about. Um, Next team would be Baylor. I don't have a ton on Baylor. They're not the most exciting team. They're 20-1 to win the conference. Probably don't really have a shot. Their win total is 7. It's about right, honestly. Blake Shapen is coming back at quarterback, who, in my mind, is pretty boring. He's not going to light it up. He's not going to blow you away, but he's probably going to be pretty solid for Baylor and what they want to do. I think the biggest question mark around Baylor is on the defensive side of the ball. This is a Baylor team that won a Big 12 championship game in the last few years. Dave Aranda came in from LSU and really seemed to set a culture of defensive toughness and being a team you really didn't want to play since he came in at Baylor. And then last year, I feel like that kind of disappeared, and they were kind of a team that wasn't really tough defensively at all. They hit the transfer portal really hard. They did well in the transfer portal. So I think that should be good for them bringing in a little more talent. And as long as everybody can buy into Aranda's beliefs and the way he likes to play, this team definitely could win 7 or 8 games. But I don't see their ceiling being much higher than that. So I don't have too much on the Bears, but one of the most intriguing teams in the Big 12 has to be TCU. They went to the national championship game last year, beat Michigan in the college football playoff semifinal. The surprise team in college football last season was the Horned Frogs, the Hypno Toad. The whole vibe was awesome. But obviously, Max Duggan is gone. Quentin Johnston, WR1, he's gone. This team did have a lot of things go their way last year. They were 6-1 in one possession games. And again, like I said, with Texas Tech, that is a really hard thing to replicate, is that type of success in close games. But who knows? TCU obviously had really good vibes last year, and that does mean something at the end of the day. But Garrett Riley is gone. He was the offensive coordinator that came in, Lincoln Riley's brother, and kind of made that offense what it was with Max Duggan. He's gone, and now Kendall Briles is in at offensive coordinator. Comes in from Arkansas. It's going to be definitely a different system. Chandler Morris is expected to be the QB1, supposed to be the starter for TCU last year. Got hurt. Max Duggan came in. Obviously, the rest is history. Heisman finalist, went to a national championship game. But Chandler Morris now coming in should be a solid QB1 in the Kendall Briles system. But I just don't think things are going to go TCU's way this year. They lost a little bit too much. There's going to be some negative regression. And their second half of the season is just a brutal, brutal stretch. They have to go to Kansas State, to Texas Tech, Texas, Baylor, and at Oklahoma is their last 5 games of the season. So that's just a really brutal final 5 games for a team that you need to win 8 games to hit that win total. So I'm going to stay away. I think 7 or 8 wins is where they end up. That kind of at Kansas State, at Texas Tech, Baylor, at Oklahoma, those games will kind of decide it, that late stretch. And I think it could be tough for TCU. I would go under if I had to go one way, honestly. I think 7 wins is probably where this team ends up. But overall, it's a stay away from me, and I hope things go well for TCU because they're a really fun team to watch, fun team to root for. So I'll be rooting for the Hypno Toad, but no play on the win total there. Um, so this is the next team I actually have a future bet on in this conference, and that is UCF, the first of the new arrivals in the Big 12 that we're going to be talking about. They are 28 to 1 to win the conference, by far the best of the four new arrivals in the conference. Their win total is only seven. They have a tougher out of conference schedule that is making that win total seven, but they are a team that by far has the most talent of the four incoming teams. John Reese Plumlee is returning at QB. He showed from a pure athleticism perspective, he can be a really good quarterback. We haven't seen his arm talent really show that he can be an elite quarterback, especially now moving up from the AAC to the Big 12 level. But if things go well with Plumlee, if baseball season went well and he's got the vibes going, this team really could have something going. Obviously, Gus Malzahn is the head coach, has tons of experience coaching at a Power 5 level, so he won't be intimidated at all by these teams. In terms of scheduling, they get a decent break. They don't have to play Texas, who I think is by far the best team in this conference, so that's huge. They also avoid TCU. And I just think one of these four newcomers to the Big 12 will make some noise and beat some teams, maybe like an Oklahoma or a Kansas State, some of these teams at the top of the conference, and make some noise. And if it's going to be anybody, I think it has to be UCF. I think they're by far the best of those four teams. So the bet I placed, not the 28 to 1 to win the conference, because I think in one game with everything on the line, there's just no way they could beat Texas. But I did bet 14 to 1 to make the Big 12 championship game on UCF. Gus Malzahn, John Reese Plumlee, 14 to 1 to make the conference championship game is a bet I really like. I think it's great value. I think that second spot behind Texas is totally up for grabs. I'm not an Oklahoma believer. I'm not really a Kansas State believer, not a TCU believer. I think that spot is totally up for grabs, and UCF could easily be the team to go and get it if everything clicks for them, especially with John Reese Plumlee. All right, after UCF, there is a bit of a drop off to the rest of the conference. UCF is 28 to 1 to win the conference. Rest of the teams are 40 to 1 or worse. Starting with Oklahoma State, they're 40 to 1. Their win total is 6.5. Things do break their way schedule wise. They don't have to play Texas, TCU, Baylor, or Texas Tech for the top six teams in this conference. So it's honestly really the only thing they have going for them. Alan Bowman is going to be the QB at Oklahoma State week one. Alan Bowman, you probably know him. He was at Texas Tech, and then where he started and played a bit. Then he went to Michigan, where he did not play at all. Now he's back in the Big 12 for Oklahoma State, and there's not too much to Alan Bowman. This Oklahoma State team just from the prime Gundy years, it's just not what it used to be, and especially with a Spencer Sanders is gone finally, thank God, because nobody fucked with us more betting week to week than Spencer Sanders, so that's great. And they brought in a defensive coordinator from Division Two. Maybe it's a great hire, but I'm not going to be totally sold on that until I see something from their defense. So I don't have anything with Oklahoma State. They probably win 6 games and make a bowl, but I'm not going to be betting on the over of them getting up to 7 wins. It's not worth laying the juice down to 6 wins. So leaving the Pokes where they are. Moving on to a team, used to be the last team you would touch on in the Big 12 every year, always used to have by far the worst odds to win the conference. Now they have odds better than 5 teams thanks to the newcomers in the conference. It is Kansas. They are also at 40 to 1. Their win total is 5.5. If you're betting their win total, you're betting on whether or not they will make a bowl game at 5 or 6 wins. They return a lot of production. Jalen Daniels back at quarterback, obviously, who had an electric season last year. The offense should be really, really fun. Should be able to score points. Jalen Daniels should be able to do his thing and put up points against these Big 12 defenses. Really the only thing I have Kansas, I'm not touching the win total, but I'm going to be betting a lot of Kansas overs. Jalen Daniels in this offense, they're going to be electric. The defense has tons of holes, tons of question marks across the defense. So I'm staying away from anything in terms of backing Kansas. But Kansas overs is going to be something that I'm all in on this year. Uh, the next team is Iowa State at 50 to 1 to win the conference. Their win total is 5.5 as well. Kind of the opposite of the couple of teams we talked about, like Texas Tech and TCU. Iowa State was 1-6 in one possession games last year. They were 115th in turnover margin. Just nothing really went the Cyclones' way last year. Anybody that's followed me for multiple years knows I love the Iowa State program. Brock Purdy, Brees Hall, those teams. Nobody loved those teams more than me. I think Matt Campbell's an amazing coach. And this is actually a team I was looking to back this season. That win total of 5.5. I said Matt Campbell's going to push, go for 6 wins, and make a bowl game. But the big scandal of the off season, their quarterback Hunter Deckers. Uh, as far as I know, nothing is official yet, but I don't think he will play another football game for Iowa State. Got in trouble for gambling, betting on his own games specifically, which is why I think there's going to be no coming back from it. It's just something Brock Purdy would never do, honestly. I miss Brocktober. Those were the glory days of Iowa State. I hope Matt Campbell can find a quarterback with some integrity, unlike Hunter Deckers. Gambling is bad and wrong and irresponsible, and he deserves everything he has coming to him. So I will not be betting their win total over. Um, the defense should be solid for Iowa State, but overall, it's a team I'm passing on because of the major question mark now at the quarterback position. But if they can figure something out at quarterback, their team I would bet week to week, especially as underdogs. I think they could be tougher than people think. Um, so on to the other three newcomers in the conference, starting with Cincinnati. They are 70 to 1 to win the conference. Their win total is 4.5. Uh, Obviously, Luke Fickell is gone, the guy who built Cincinnati into a program that the Big 12 would want. Um, he's now gone at Wisconsin, a team that I'm excited about. If you listen to my Big Ten preview, if not, you should do it now. Satterfield comes in as the new head coach. He's a guy that I hate. I don't have any belief in whatsoever, so I hate the Cincinnati team. They bring in a quarterback in Emory Jones, who's like 40 from Florida. He's a guy I don't believe in. Lots of guys transferred out when Luke Fickell announced he was leaving. So this is a team I don't really like at all. I'm strongly considering betting the win total of under 4.5, but they did get a really favorable schedule, which is kind of killing me. I wish I could fade this team, but I don't think I can. I will be fading them week to week. I think against the big dogs in this conference, they could get blown out big time. So I will be fading Cincinnati on a week to week basis. Emory Jones, Satterfield, trash. The next team is BYU, the Cougs, now in the Big 12. They bring in Keaton Slovis at quarterback. Obviously, he was at USC, had a bunch of Heisman hype. Things didn't go his way. He transferred to Pitt. Things didn't go his way. So now he's here in Provo at BYU. This is a big jump in talent level for BYU. It is for all these teams, like coming into the Big 12 from group of five conferences. But for BYU particularly, is a pretty big jump in talent level. Schedule wise, they did bring in a lot of guys on defense through the transfer portal. They kind of revamped, and I think their defense should be better. But I'm not a Keaton Slovis believer. I've fallen for this one a couple of times. Keaton Slovis is one of those guys that I've bought into in off seasons in the past, and I'm not willing to do it again. So I'm selling BYU in this conference. I don't think they'll really be able to compete at this point, maybe one day, but I'm just staying away from BYU altogether. The last of those new arrivals is Houston. They're 200 to 1 to win the conference, over 4.5 wins. They have the worst odds of any of the new teams to come in. Their quarterback is going to be Donovan Smith, who transferred in from Texas Tech. I don't want to be mean because I love Dana Holgerson. I think he's one of those great personalities. in college football. He's done amazing things for the game in college football. What he did with the air raid with Mike Leach, RIP Mike Leach, the legend. What Dana's done, he's had some really fun teams, West Virginia, some really exciting teams, teams that you want to root for. But I'm not sure he totally has a grasp on where he wants his Houston program to be. I guess the fact that they've moved into the Big 12 is a big win for him and for their program. But it seems like kind of since the De'Ara King stuff, where it was like, oh, Houston's going to be the best group of five team in the nation. And then things don't really work out. De'Ara King transfers. And ever since then, things have been kind of weird at Houston. Um, so, kind of what I see from this team, I think maybe they win one game in the conference that they're not supposed to against a Baylor or a Kansas State or a TCU and create some noise, but then they're probably going to lose to some bad teams. That's just what Dana's Houston teams seem to have done the last few years. Is they'll have one game where you buy in and you're like, oh, look at this. This is the Dana Holgerson team that I've been looking for, and then they'll lose to somebody terrible. So can't really invest in Houston season long. It's too risky in either direction, honestly. Um, but there are going to be some good spots, I think, to maybe fade them in spots that they're a favorite or even in a close game, close spread, and then to back them in a game where maybe they're a big dog and you think they could pull off the upset. But then the last team in the conference, it is West Virginia. They are also 200 to 1. Their win total is also 4.5. They bring in Garrett Green to be the new quarterback, not bring him in. He was already with the program, but JT Daniels was QB1 last year. He's gone. The JT Daniels experiment didn't really work, contrary to what I thought. I thought it was going to be a great partnership. Didn't really work out. Garrett Green is going to be QB1. There's a new OC in at West Virginia. They're going to really emphasize running the football, I think. Garrett Green is solid in the run game from the quarterback position. They have a good offensive line, a good stable of running backs. Their defense is a major question mark across the defense. Don't really know what you're going to get from West Virginia. It's probably not going to be very good. The schedule's tough for West Virginia. They're on the road a lot, playing some of the tougher teams in the conference. So I think 4.5 is about right. I don't see this team getting to 5 or 6 wins, making a bowl game at 6 wins. I think 4 or 5 wins is about right. It could be a coin flip in a couple of spots. So stay away from me on West Virginia. But they're a team I always kind of find myself rooting for. So hoping for the best for the New Year's this year. All right, so that's it for the Big 12 conference. Obviously, heavy emphasis on Texas with Dillon. It was great to run through everything. I think they're going to be an awesome team. But just to wrap things up, my future bets for the Big 12. Texas to win the conference, I got at plus 125. I would take anything, honestly, minus 110 or better. I think is a fair price. I think they'll be bigger favorites than that against whoever they play in the Big 12 championship game. My favorite win total is Oklahoma under 9.5 wins. I think they're really going to struggle. I decided to pull the trigger on Cincinnati under 5 wins. I think the turnover at the quarterback position, the coaching spot with Luke Fickell out, Cincinnati's a team I want to fade. You can get under 5 wins at plus money, and I'm going to take it and run. And then UCF, 14 to 1 to make the Big 12 championship game. I think of the 4 new teams, they're the one that could really make some noise in the conference as soon as this year. So I'm pulling the trigger, taking a chance on what I consider a wide open second spot after Texas in that Big 12 championship game. And honestly, UCF getting in there would help the Texas future to win the conference because Texas, I think, would take care of them pretty easily. So those are my futures. Texas to win, UCF to make the championship, under on the win total for Oklahoma and Cincinnati. That's it for the Big 12. Thank you for watching. Next week will be the SEC previews, SEC East on Tuesday, SEC West on Friday. Will be broken into 2 parts because there's just way too much SEC to talk. And then next thing you know, it will be week 0. And we will be talking about real college football games that we're going to be betting on. There's going to be some great guests still coming the rest of the way. So thank you to everybody. Make sure you're spreading the word, sharing the show with your friends, with your fellow gamblers. Make sure you like the show, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And yeah, thanks for listening and see you next time.